I'm Nick DiMatteo, and welcome to Season 7, Episode 25 of Music is Not a Genre. Do the hand gestures with me, MxG. If you want to see me doing them, you're just listening. Well, thank you as always for watching and listening, and those listeners can go to youtube.com/@musicisnotagenre. You get a video for every episode of this podcast. Watchers, go to nickdimatteo.com/musicisnotagenre if you would just rather listen and not ask why I look this way for this episode, and you'll find out soon enough. And everyone, go to patreon.com/musicisnotagenre to support this podcast, my band Rec, and everything I do. And by the way, Rec's new single, Eat Salvation, dropped a couple of weeks ago. You can stream it everywhere. Go to nickdimatteo.com/music, and you will find all the links there. Or /discography, either one works. Also, by the end of this week, this episode drops on May 5th or something, and by May 9th, there will be a remix of Eat Salvation by Leslie Baroness dropping everywhere as well. So please check out Rec's music. And of course, like, subscribe, share, rate, review. I think there's one more. Do all that because the algorithms want you to. So let's get to the topic this week and why I look this way. It is Yoko Ono. Yoko, oh yes. So, why this topic? First of all, yes, I am wearing this shirt backwards and inside out. Check out the tag there. And I have deliberately not done much of anything with my hair because, you know, avant-garde, and all that stuff, and weirdness. And that's going to be part of this episode, and humor as well. But why? Why have I dedicated an entire episode to Yoko Ono? Okay, so if you've been following along, I'm actually, almost dropped my mouse. I'm actually a Beatles fan, big Beatles fan. I'm in a Beatles cover band, blah, blah, blah. I've done many Beatles episodes, 10 or 11, and I've mentioned the Beatles in many other episodes. They're a touchstone, you know, for many people, not just me. And in many of those episodes, I have mentioned Yoko. And usually it's in the context of having run across people on forums or wherever I'm looking for information and wanting to learn more who don't like her, who denigrate her, who don't respect her, etc., etc. And I will get into some of the reasons why people are Yoko haters and how valid or not valid that is later on. I'll touch on it here and there, but especially in my conclusions. And that's the reason I am doing this episode. First of all, I mean, there's two reasons. Many more than two. I can't in good conscience have spent hours on the Beatles mentioning Yoko that often and not dedicate an entire episode to her. She deserves an episode all on her own, just for her own work, apart from John and the Beatles and all of that and MxG. All right. And the other reason is escaping me right now. I think that reason is actually good enough in and of itself. My objective here, though, is threefold: to convince some of you that Yoko does not deserve her negative reputation. May convince one or two of you. Doubt it, but I'm going to try. Number two, to attract people who already believe that she deserves a better reputation and want to riff with me and want to, you know, commiserate on why people don't respect her, etc. And also poke the bear. Poke the racist, misogynist bears out there who still believe the propaganda about Yoko. And if that's you, hi. I want to be your friend, but I also want to poke you because I don't agree with you, all right? And you're going to find out a whole hell of a lot about Yoko and about why I don't agree if you stick with me with this episode. And in doing all that, I'm going to explain, as far as the haters go, both their lapse in logic and their lack of true respect for John Lennon and the Beatles' legacy. People believe, weirdly, that respecting the Beatles and disrespecting Yoko somehow works. But I will explain why, if you truly love and respect the Beatles, then you should at least respect Yoko, if not love her. As usual, I'll go through the history, discography, some conclusions, featured song, and questions, and the bonus MxTRA video for this week on Yoko. I'm very excited about at patreon.com/music is not a genre is on her films. On her films. I thought they deserved a mini episode of their own, and they don't fit into this larger episode, and it's going to be a big episode. So I'm dedicating an entire bonus MxTRA video at patreon.com/music is not a genre to talk about her many avant-garde films. All right. So I'm also an actor and filmmaker, so I had some kind of an interest in that anyway, and I was curious. She's made at least 16 films, and I honestly didn't know that until I started this research. So some sources for this and the bonus episode: Wikipedia, Bandcamp, YouTube, IMDb, bfi.org.uk, which is the British Film Institute, cinephiles.bamfa.berkeley.edu, and BAMFA is Berkeley Art Museum Pacific Film Archive. Some disclaimers. I'm going to focus on Yoko as an entity apart from the Beatles and John, just as I would any subject, and I'm only going to bring in the Beatles and John when it crosses over with her, and it doesn't very often, including her music catalog, because there were times where, of course, she did collaborations with John. Because this is largely a music podcast, I'm going to spend the bulk of the time on Yoko's music and only mention her other artistic and political pursuits in passing, including visual art and film and her activism and all that stuff. And in part, that's to help illustrate how creative and prolific she's been and what a vital force she's been in the world. But again, I'm going to, stick to the music, except, of course, as I mentioned, for the bonus MxTRA at Patreon about her films. As usual, I'm only going to dig into the live and compilation albums. If there's something new or significant on them, I will mention them, but I'm not going to dig into them. I'm going to present the conclusions as opinion. I always qualify what I say as this is just me talking. Facts are facts, yes. But when I extemporize, when I editorialize, yeah, that's my opinion. Now, here's the thing about this one, though. These opinions are so well-reasoned that I'm going to just say they're fact. And you don't have to live with it, but you have to live with me saying that they're fact. I'm going to get heated. Another disclaimer. I'm going to get heated, especially regarding Yoko haters. And you may love or hate my language around this. Those are my disclaimers. Let's just get into the topic now. History of Yoko Ono. She was born in Tokyo. The Tokyo wasn't fully Tokyo at the time, and eventually a bunch of different areas became Tokyo a little bit later on, but we're going to call it Tokyo. In 1933, her family went back and forth from Japan to the U.S. in the 1930s and 40s, so she had a lot of touch with the U.S. before she settled there. Before settling back in Japan in 1941, the family. And then her family moved to Scarsdale, New York after World War II, which is not that far from where I live. It's just upstate. And she joined them after finishing school. So she was actually, it looks like, to my knowledge, in Japan by herself from like 46 or so to 52. She then went to Sarah Lawrence up there, studying poetry, English lit, and music composition. So from the very beginning, she was studying music. Her musical heroes were Arnold Schoenberg and Alban Berg, 12-tone composers, fellow weirdos, people who think outside of the box. So she wrote some of those kind of 12-tone and odd compositions herself from the very beginning. And her teacher was like, oh, you like that? So why don't you pay attention to some other avant-garde composers like Edgar Varese and John Cage? I never quite know how to say Varese. Is it Varese? Varese? I used to think it was Varese. I know it's not. There's a Chicago song called A Hit by Varese or whatever. So that's always been in my head. I should probably just look up how to pronounce it. You tell me how to pronounce it. She eventually married a Japanese composer, Toshi Ichiyanagi, or Ichiyanagi Toshi, depending on what culture. Then studied. He was studying at Juilliard, and it was well known already in Tokyo's experimental music community. And they moved to New York City from up there in the late 1950s. She's been involved in the art scene since the early 1960s, and including, and especially at the time, the Fluxus movement, basically experimental and performance art, kind of neo-Dadaism is what I would call it, but maybe with a little more meaning than Dadaism. And this is all to say that she had three key things from the very beginning. And what do I mean by beginning? Beginning of her career, beginning of her studies, beginning that happened well before anything having to do with the Beatles. And those three things are an artistic mindset, training and education in more than one discipline, and more than a passing interest in experimental music and art. She was already laying her career foundation long before meeting Lennon. On a fourth thing, she was established as an American and New Yorker far earlier than any of the Beatles. Now, I don't think I was aware of that until I did this research, but she was, living in America and an American citizen long before any of the Beatles. She started exhibiting her visual art in 1961, and same year she had her first major concert performance. Yes, it was experimental music. Stravinsky, Ives, Schoenberg, etc., they set the stage for more experimental music to come. By the time Yoko was deeply involved in it, it had already been established as a strain of musical composition and expression because of John Cage, in large part, whom she met through her husband, who was a student, and others, student of John Cage, and others like John Cage. What she was doing was unconventional, but not unheard of, is my point. It was in many ways right in line with the avant-garde of the day. After some rough times, including a divorce from Ichiyanagi, she married Anthony Cox in 1962 and 3. Had to marry twice because there was an issue with not annulling the first marriage, etc. But married, for sure by 63. He was a film producer and art promoter and helped her. That's the guy she had Kyoko with in 1963. That marriage sucked. Was kind of one of convenience and career in many ways. Maybe they tried for other things, didn't work. Only lasted until 1969. Side note that Anthony Cox was fucking crazy. He took Kyoko away in 1971 during a custody dispute and won custody. So he basically kidnapped her and yet still won custody. Despite Yoko and John Lennon searching for her, she didn't see Kyoko again until 1998. Pause for humanity. I don't care who you are, unless you are an asshole. And part of my contention here is that Yoko is a person and a worthy person. If you had your first child, and within the first 10 years of her life, that child is taken away from you, that hurts. That's real. And it means that Anthony Cox is a cock. So she met Paul McCartney in 1966. I'm not going to go into detail about that, blah, 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 because you've probably read it before, and there are many accounts of she was asking for stuff, and he said, no, why don't you ask John, and blah, blah, blah. She just wanted some kind of artistic connection with some of the great artists of the day, being the Beatles. The fact that she, quote unquote, settled for John because Paul said no to her is, again, just part of the misogynist bullshit that I'm sick and tired of. Subsequently did meet Lennon the same year. By this point, she'd had several art exhibits and music performances. So again, she was very well established before meeting John Lennon, more established in that arts community than they were, She and Lennon were together as early as 1968 and then eventually inseparable. I'm not going to mention a whole lot about the personal here because, again, I don't do that for any podcast, but also because this has been delved into and misinterpreted and prosecuted in so many ways. Not necessarily something I need to go into, although in my conclusions, I will make mention of some of this in the context of judging her, right? Now, I'm not condoning Lennon's behavior in relation to Cynthia, but I understand the desire to find a more appropriate soulmate when you're in the middle of an unsuccessful marriage. Happened to me in a very different way, but it happened to me. Though, of course, yes, he could have handled it better. From that point on, they were together. They eventually married. Of course, the lost weekend in the 70s of about 18 months when John was having a sanctioned relationship with May Pang. Then they reconciled and they had Sean in 75, etc., etc. And that's it. That's all I'm going into about their relationship, because this is about Yoko and not about that. Their personal relationship, I should say. But as for their professional relationship, they started collaborating on music and film in 1968, formed the Plastic Ono Band in 68-69. Through the late 60s and early 70s, Lennon helped her release music in conjunction with his releases and on her own. They collaborated on albums. They took a big break music-wise. Well, Yoko did after 1973, 74-ish. And I'll explain why I say that. That ended with the Double Fantasy in 80 and Milk and Honey in 84, as far as their collaborations. There's more from her in between. She's released over a dozen solo albums from 1970 to this year, kind of this year, although her last proper solo album was just a few years ago. I wouldn't say that's super prolific, but pretty consistent and a body of work, and a diverse body of work. She actually eventually in the 2000s and 2010s had a string of dance club hits that were number one on the dance charts. And I'll talk about that later on in the discography. We're going to get into more details about all of that in the discography, which is coming up in a second. She continued to create visual art through the 2010s at least, and has been politically and socially active her entire life and to this day. That's the history. Let's get into the discography. I'm going to do them chronologically, whether or not they're collaborations and whether or not they were actually released. You'll understand what I mean later. But I'm not going to spend much, if any, time on John's output, because I did an episode on John and I weighed in on his music on those albums. I might mention it here or there. All right. So, first album, Unfinished Music, number 1, Two Virgins in 1968, the first of 3 with John. It's that famous cover of them naked, I assume signifying raw exposure and lack of artifice, though, of course, there's a lot of artifice in experimental music in its own way. It was all experimental, collages, found sound, musique concrète, noise, and avant-garde, akin in many ways to Revolution 9. Hard to judge as musical compositions because, to me, they're kind of meant to be brash and background all at once, which is an interesting place to be, both getting your attention but also kind of meandering, you know. I prefer side 2 to side 1, but neither one is a fave. I love the idea of experimental music. I don't always like it in terms of listening, although I will say if you hang with any of these, you find really interesting things if you've got that kind of attention span. The bonus track, Remember Love, was the B-side of Give Peace a Chance. It's a minimalist acoustic, not unlike a lot of indie stuff from the last 20 years. So somewhat ahead of her time. Bon Iver, Japanese Breakfast, MxG, people like that. Next album in 1969 was Unfinished Music number 2, Life with the Lions, inspired by her very famous art installation Grapefruit from 1964, conceptual art. This album was meant to continue the life chronicle. That's what these 3 albums were, kind of putting their life on wax. Side 1 is the track Cambridge 1969. And if the 14-plus minute tracks of the first album were a bit long, this one at over 26 minutes is, I guess, the ultimate of this form. I think it was the longest they released. Again, I think I listened to it all the way through quite a while ago and found it interesting in parts. You know, that's kind of how these compositions are meant to be, to my mind, because life is often interesting, often mundane, etc. But the variety shows an awareness of the form beyond just tinkering with it, a willingness to go everywhere, which is the thing I love the most about these, and a wider range than is given credit for. You hear snatches of music and the mixing of genres in among these long compositions. The fact that this was live and improvised is one of the most compelling things about it. A lot of this stuff is what people are doing on Instagram and TikTok now in a much, 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 much shorter form, kind of inanity, you know, just for its own sake or things like that. Musicians incorporate these things into more traditional songs, just as Yoko would down the line, and other well-known and lesser-known musicians. I've incorporated experimental things into more traditional song forms such as the heartbeat that shows up there, things like that. Side 2 is some of my favorite tracks here. No Bed for Beatle John is her singing press clippings. Again, that's something that somebody would do on TikTok. Then there's 2 minutes silence, inspired by John Cage, of course. Radio play, which is over 12 minutes, making rhythms by fucking with the radio dial. Clink, 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 making a rhythm. I've actually put those kind of glitchy things in as rhythmic elements in some of my songs, including The Power of Repetition Everlasting and Treading Too Deep. And you can look them up, nickdamadio.com/discography. I wouldn't do 12 solo minutes of it, but I find that the fact they did that, it's kind of a going strain through a lot of what she did in particular, which is to take things past the breaking point time-wise. And that is a common thing in comedy, and it's somewhat common thing in certain kinds of music. I prefer it more on the comedy side. The CD bonus track was Song for John. It's a minute and a half, and I actually like that song quite a bit. And then Mulberry is 8:47. It's another experimental. Third album is Wedding Album, 1969. Again, third of the trilogy. Number 1, side 1, John and Yoko. The whole side. Number 2, Amsterdam. Had these sides been presented as live performances accompanying visual art, that would have made them, I think, easier to absorb. It's as digestible to me as looking through someone else's wedding album. Maybe that's why they called it that, which is to say there's moments of interest amid lots of non-interest. But again, these weren't meant to resemble traditional music at all. They did the job they set out to do. I like the idea they were putting forth that an artist's life is itself art. And I would further that to say everyone's life is art if it's put in context. Now, is all that art worthy of consumption? No. But is it worthy of creation? Yes, absolutely. Should exist. And big note here, and I will mention this more than once, we forget in our serious critique of Yoko's works and with and without John, and if you have disdain for them, we forget that a huge part of Yoko's contributions in any medium was humor. She herself said it. John even said it. They said that a lot of the fact that much of this was meant to be funny, short form funny, long form funny, subtly funny, more out there funny, was missed because people were taking everything so seriously. And he said that partly in the interview that was captured on Side 2 Amsterdam, which had to do, there was some little bits of interview and stuff. None of it was meant to be taken wholly seriously. Some serious, but not wholly. And it really does say a lot about a person if their hatred of her and the music completely misses the humor. Maybe you're humorless, or maybe your idea of humor is very mundane. Point of all this is these songs deserve actual critique as serious pieces of work, but if we put ourselves in their place, which I like to do because I am a creator, and imagine creating this stuff, then you got to laugh. Because imagine being in a studio or live or wherever it is and creating 14 or 12 or 8 or 26 minutes of this stuff and then saying, you know what I'm going to do next? I'm going to release it into the world. I mean, that's funny to me. And sitting like fucking with the radio dial on that one, or screaming or wailing or singing random melodies while reading prose. Kids do this stuff. So they wanted to get back to that childlike thing. And that's the spirit that they fully captured, to my mind. It's not 100% listenable, but I don't think it's meant to be unless you're high. But it's not trash. It isn't. There's a reason for it existing and a reason for it being created. And I challenge you, if you are a creator, to do something like this and then to release it into the world. That's my challenge to you. Next album release was Live Peace in Toronto, 1969. That's the total name of the album. It's the first time the Plastic Ono Band was recorded. It's part of the Toronto Rock and Roll Revival Festival, which I saw a doc on, which was really interesting. Decent, honestly, a really good performance considering they didn't really rehearse. Your Blues and Cold Turkey are two of my favorite songs. Don't Worry, Kyoko is very cool considering what was going on with her, it's much more heartfelt than Impressions would imply. That things going on with her husband, her ex-husband, and Kyoko. It was ahead of its time, that song, and people like Iggy Pop and Perry Farrell have said as much. 1970, they released Yoko Ono Plastic Ono Band, which many people consider their first proper music album. I'll let you decide if that's true. Yoko's debut solo album was her half of this. So there's John Lennon Plastic Ono Band, there's Yoko Plastic Ono Band. They were both released the same day on 1970. They didn't fully leave behind the kind of formless avant-garde music concrète, but this is way more straightforward. It's often considered proto-punk. When you start to meld experiment with structure, that's when I perk up. I've done it. Any other artist who's done it, when there's that balance there. I won't say it's 100% listenable beginning to end, but side one is pretty darn strong, and it's some of Ringo's best drumming on record, period. Why? It's the opening track I really enjoy. Why not? Not so much. Greenfield Morning, I pushed an empty baby carriage all over the city. I love it. It's funky. It moves. Side two, there's nothing on there that I particularly love, but give it a shot. Bonuses, alternate version of Open Your Box. You can start to see on Open Your Box how she ends up being a dance club darling later in her career. And then a couple of others that were bonuses. Something More Abstract and The South Wind, which are 44 seconds and over 16 minutes. Nice contrast there. 1971's Fly, to me, is her first proper solo album. And it's the soundtrack to her film of the same name. And we'll get into her films in the bonus MxTRA video, patreon.com/music's not a genre. You get to hear more about Fly and all of her films. It's proto-kraut rock. You hear me say proto a lot with Yoko because she was ahead of her time, in terms of art and music and all of that. When she sings more traditionally, her voice is almost sweet, and it would get sweeter as the years would go on. First two sides, more straightforward. The other two sides, more abstract. So it's a double album. I think what angers some people is that she got to do this, got to release it, and had the courage to do it in the first place, to be laughed at and knew she'd be laughed at, and John did too. Again, that was part of the point, to be dismissed for all the reasons people dismiss strong women, Asian women, whatever, but still able to explore every last thing she wanted to. How many artists, and I include myself in this, secretly wish they could go that far? How many people wish they could go that far in their lives? This album is very representative of her early period, and it's considered one of her best works. Side one, there's nothing on there that I favorited. Side two, kind of same thing, except for Hirake, previously released as Open Your Box. There you go. It's overtly sexual, and I'm sure this pissed people off and probably still does to this day. It's also super funky, and screw you if it pisses you off. Side three, one of my faves, is Don't Count the Waves. And I think of the abstract stuff that she's done earlier in her career, this is my favorite. And then side four, not bad. But 1997 reissue bonus tracks. Side four, by the way, has again a very long 22-plus minute title track. And then Telephone Piece, which was 33 seconds. There was a bonus track on the 1997 reissue, Between the Takes. I love this because it fucks with people and it moves. And another bonus on there was Will You Touch Me, the demo. Very nice that she could write something so traditional and subtle like Will You Touch Me amidst all of the nuttiness shows, A, she knew music. She knows music. You know, people. It's like what people said Courtney Love, Kurt did everything. No, fuck that. Courtney Love knew music, did music well. Yoko knows music, does it well. And B, others would kill for this range. Maybe not everyone. People who like to be in the pocket in terms of their art don't care. I like people who have range. I just do. There were a few more bonus tracks. Okay. Sometime in New York City was released in 1972. And programming note, we're going to go a little long with these halves. We're not getting to the break yet because there's quite a bit of material to cover. So this will be a little bit more than an hour. And I guess you would have seen that if you clicked on it already. That album, as historically is known about John's albums, not well received. Lots has been said in relation to John, including by me on my episode on him in that. So I'm skipping that and focusing on Yoko's songs. Though I will say the production is which is one of the criticisms. Zappa's Mothers of Invention played on it, and they didn't even like it. I also think a lot of production from that era is a little flat for me. Not all. It doesn't always work for me. Plus, I haven't been a fan of 1950s throwback music since probably the early 1980s. It just grates on me. I'm more than fine with political music. I am. But if it's not actually compelling or good or listenable, then it fails in one of its core missions, which is to get people to listen, take note, and take action. And that was the problem with this album. So some of the things I like, We're All Water. The sax makes me want to throw my phone. But this is probably the best of her 3 songs on Sometime in New York City, partly because it's very punk. And I like the juxtaposition of the style and the more poetic lyrics. We're All Water from Sometime in New York City is worth listening to. Her others on that album were Sisters, Oh Sisters, and Born in a Prison, which I like the harmonies from that one, but not necessarily the song. 1973, she released Approximately Infinite Universe, her 3rd proper solo album. So if you say Yoko, Plastic Ono was 1, Fly was 2, this is 3rd. Another double album. Whatever else came before this that I said I liked does not come close to this album. This is where I really check in with her development as a musician. It's also considered one of her best. Had this been made by some anonymous female artist at the time, well, no, it still would have been probably ignored because female artist, but had it been made by a man, it probably would have been praised as solid. This has been retrospectively praised, and rightly so. If it had been released a few years later, or say in the 1990s, critics would have just fallen all over it. Understated vocals that really work, that defy people's impression of Yoko just being kind of a ululation all the time. No. Even though this throws most or all experimentation out the window, the range and variety are super impressive. Most artists never have range like this. That includes the lyrics, which go confessional, heartfelt, angry, defiant, political, personal, serious, funny. There's no limit. Yang Yang opens it up. I love that. The remix of that charted in 2002. Death of Samantha, also freaking great. 1-2 punch at the beginning. It was the second single paired with the previous song, and you can hear why. Then I Want My Love the Rest Tonight. What Did I Do? Funky, again, kind of foretelling her dance triumphs. Why did she have such dance success? Combo of minimalism, expression, repetition, and funkiness. What she does works for that. Then Have You Seen Horizon Lately? Side 2, Approximately Infinite Universe, title track, very rocky horror. I like it. Peter the Dealer, Song for John, Catman, The Rosies Are Coming. What a bastard the world is. And then another one I like, Waiting for the Sunrise. If this doesn't show up soon in a film, soundtrack, or TV show, I will be monumentally surprised. Side 3, I felt like smashing my face in a clear glass window. I love just the title. Winter Song, Kite Song. Yeah, of course I like this. Kite to Camden is Rex's new album. What a Mess. Shira Nakara, I Didn't Know. Air Talk. Side 4, I Have a Woman Inside My Soul. Nice. People talked about that way after she did. Move On Fast. Nice. The remix reached number 1 on the dance charts much later. Now or Never was the first single with the previous song. I don't love it. Is Winter Here to Stay? Looking Over from My Hotel Window. I like Looking Over from My Hotel Window for some reason. We're going to do one more. I'm going to do 2 more. So hang with me. Feeling the Space, 1973 was her final released album of the early period. Not a fave. Some interesting stuff. A little bland. Previous album was a sweet spot for me. The feminist themes are worthy of making an album about, but it doesn't really grab you, me. It doesn't have as much range to me. It leans too much into kind of soft country rock pop for me. So I will say that the only ones I like on here are Side 2, 1,000 Times Yes, Angry Young Woman, which is bold and somehow works, Woman Power, which is the first single, and I really like it. Men, 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 nicely done old music hall style with subversive lyrics. She would go to that kind of music hall, style quite often in her career. Technically, after 1973, she took a big music break, but not necessarily true. An album was recorded and left unreleased in its entirety until 1997. And I'm going to talk about that before the break. And that album is called A Story, made in 1974. It's a great album. Better than the previous one. Less kind of boilerplate. More feeling, ironically. Recorded during the Lost Weekend. And it's almost every song is not on streaming. Title track is really good and the arrangement is great. Loneliness has a very cool Beatles-y thing, which is unusual for her. I also like Dogtown. Haunting, but also chill. Yes, I'm a Witch is excellent. And it blends itself to the title of essentially two remix albums in the 2000s and 2010s. She Gets Down on Her Knees I really like as well. And the last song, Hard Times Are Over, I like a lot. I knew it for some reason and I don't know why. But what I do know is that it is time for a break after a slightly long half. So stay tuned for the mid-roll. We'll be back in less than a minute. Hey, thanks for checking out this episode of Music is Not a Genre. If you'd like to learn more about this podcast, if you'd like to learn more about the music I do with my band Rec or any other projects or anything else about me, go to nickdematteo.com. That's Nick, DEMATTEO.com. And everything is there. There's even a link to a merch store where you can get t-shirts and mugs and hats and totes and notebooks and so many other things. I'm always adding new products there. Great way to support the podcast. And finally, go to patreon.com/music is not a genre if you really like to show your support. My fans and lovely family there get exclusives and other perks and early releases, and they get to suggest topics for future podcasts as well. Thanks for listening to the mid-roll. Now back to the show. All right, we are back. Have you gotten used to my hair and wearing this shirt backwards? There's the tag. It's a hoodie shirt that I'm wearing backwards too, which almost makes it look legit. Like I've just got some kind of a, frou-frou collar, whatever. So let's get back to the discography, which there was a break after 1974. And that was all the Sean period and all of that. And then in 1980, of course, Double Fantasy comes. This album's been talked about ad infinitum. I'm not going to do it. What I will comment on is that people usually say the album would have been great if her stuff wasn't on it. And I have a couple comments about that. One is, fuck you if you believe that. And I'm saying that, let me see if I can express this properly, genuinely. Not you as a person, but your opinion. I don't know you as a person. You may be a wonderful person, but if you believe she ruined this album, then fuck your opinion about that. Secondly, it wasn't just well received because he died. I think it's a legitimately strong album. And thirdly, I've talked about this album, so I'm not going into which John songs I like or how it rates overall. And quite a few of John's songs I really, really like. And of course, since this is a Yoko podcast, let's get into her contributions on this album. Kiss, 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 B-side Starting Over. I think this song is the litmus test as to whether or not you like and respect Yoko. And if you haven't heard anything, especially, or you know people who haven't, play this song first, see what their response is. I remember flipping over I have a 45 in the other room of Starting Over, and I remember flipping it over and playing this song and being scared because it was jarring. It was not music I had listened to before, especially at that age. And then as I got older, I grew to, actually not even that much older, might have taken a few months if I can remember correctly, I grew to really enjoy it. And I realized, I kind of like that kind of mix of punk and dance and, experimental. This tune and most of what she wrote for this album, to me, and it's no judgment on John, they're more forward-looking than any of John's stuff. John was reminiscing, musically speaking as well, going back to forms and certain things on most of the songs that harken back to even before Beatles, and it worked for this. To me, much better than his covers album and some of the other stuff. But it was clearly meant to remind people of older music, while Yoko's music was pushing the envelope forward. So, Give Me Something is one of my new favorite songs of hers. I really, really love that. I'm Moving On is kind of more like what John did in the album. It's pretty good, but not one of my faves. Yes, I'm Your Angel. Again, that old music hall style. It shouldn't work, but the tra-la-la-la-la, or however that worked, it actually, something about the way she delivers it works. It's perfect for this song. The lyrics work. Beautiful Boys, more like her early 70s stuff. Fine, not my fave. Every Man is a Woman Who Loves Him is so 1980 in all the best ways. Very kind of blondie post-punk, and it totally works. So another favorite on this album, along with Give Me Something. A non-album track, Walking on Thin Ice. This is really the start of her dance triumphs. And it's also her, I think, only charting single on the mainstream charts. It went to 58. It's New Wave Dance. Awesome. Released in early 81. And apparently, it was the last music John ever played. The guitar, I believe. Versions were also released as singles in 2003 and 2013, and both went to number 1 on the dance charts. So Walking on Thin Ice is considered one of her best tracks ever. Which brings us to 1981, and you can understand why this is a significant year in release, called Season of Glass. Even you assholes can understand why this was a big step for her, so soon after John's death. Some people believe, and they would say it of her because they hate her, that it's callous to have jumped back into music so quickly. But I'm telling you, and I've heard this from so many artists, hundreds, thousands, who knows? The list is infinite. I would say every artist in many ways, almost every artist. It is cathartic, therapeutic to jump back into creation during times of grief. It helps you process your grief. It helps you find moments of joy in something of life. This was also her highest charting solo album at number 49. I don't understand why this is not on streaming, and you heard me say it. Find it on YouTube, but Season of Glass is not on streaming. Probably some contractual thing. I don't know, but it's dumb. Hopefully somebody's working on that. It's really strong. It is not overdone. It's very affecting, and the cover says it all with the glass sunglasses with blood on them, the broken sunglasses. Oh my God! A lot of people had issues with that. I think it's in your face, brilliant. So much indie pop or indie soft rock of the last 10 years has been like this album, but this is rawer and less arch than most of what's come out recently, and it's one of my top favorite albums of hers. That said, people love Goodbye Sadness. It's not my favorite. Mindweaver, Even When You're Far Away, Nobody Sees Me Like You Do. Great songs, all of them. Turn of the Reel is fine. Dogtown was re-recorded from a story. I like the original better. And then Silver Horse. Side 2, I don't know why. I don't know why either. Number 9, track 9 or side 2, track 2, whatever. Extension 33, yes, I like it. But no. Incredible. And has had a long dance club life and several reissues and remixes. Listen to No from Season of Glass. Will You Touch Me? It was fine. She Gets Down on Her Knees, also re-recorded from a story. I like this version better than the original, so it's flippy there. And then Toy Boat, Mother of the Universe. Which brings us to the next solo album, back-to-back, fairly rapidly. It's All Right, parentheses, I See Rainbows from 1982. Also not on streaming. I'm sure this is a contract thing. Otherwise, these would be out there. I mean, I know selections have been on certain compilations and whatever, but they should be out in full. Although I'll say this, the production on this is more commercial. I like the electronic stuff and the experimentation, how she weaves in the avant-garde, but keeps the compositions tight. But some of it doesn't date well. Most of it is cool new wave as far as the sound. As far as the songs, I like the songs on Season of Glass better. Side 1, My Man, it's fine. Never Say Goodbye is like a Cocteau Twins song. Fucking listen to Never Say Goodbye. Find it. The Speck of Dust is fine. 4, Loneliness. As good in its own way as the version from A Story. So this was also re-recorded from A Story. Both versions I like equally. Tomorrow May Never Come, also from A Story. Nearly identical to the original, but I like this one better for some reason. I don't know why. This the energy or something. Side 2, It's All Right. Really good song. And then the rest of it, Wake Up, Let the Tears Dry, Dream Love, I See Rainbows. Not my favorites. 1984, she posthumously released Milk and Honey, which, again, lots has been written about this. I happen to really love this album, especially Nobody Told Me There'd Be Days Like These. That was a great single. I love that song. I'm Stepping Out is great, whatever. Yoko stuff is okay. I think her stuff on Double Fantasy was stronger, but it does fit on this album, and I like how they sequenced it to be very similar to Double Fantasy. But I think this also shows that John's death really moved her forward artistically, in that Season of Glass is so much stronger than any of the stuff, almost any of the stuff, I will say, on Milk and Honey and Double Fantasy. It's very her. It's very personal, So her composition, Sleepless Night, minimalism, and it works. Don't Be Scared should have been another reggae disaster, and I've talked about that in previous episodes, but her light vocals kind of make it sort of work. Oh Sanity, Your Hands, Let Me Count the Ways, a demo. Oh, it clearly works. Very, very nice. And then You're the One. Closes the album. Great sound. I love the sound. It's very Cocteau Twins. I don't love the song, but the sound is amazing. Speaking of sound, Star Piece, again, 1985. Again, not on streaming is what I meant. But should be found on YouTube. That's where I found it. YouTube often saves the day. This is the last of her middle period albums. So if you consider from 68 to 74, her early period albums, or all the contributions she made on those albums, whatever. Then 80 to 85 to me is her middle period. There's some good stuff, but like with a lot of artists at the time, 80s exploration was wearing thin, and I'm not a fan of mid-80s production anyway. I think she was going for positivity here, which is to her credit, but it seems a little too facile, all right? She called her sides Air Side and B Side, B-E. Air Side number opens with Hell in Paradise, which was a dance hit. It's fine. It's not my favorite dance. Another favorite on here, though, is the last song on side 1, Remember Raven. I like it. It works really well to me, despite the rest of the album being tough. In fact, there's nothing on side 2 that really captures me. I think Cape Clear, the opening track on side 2, could have worked really well if it was produced in a different era. 85 was tough, man. So she took a break from creating music for various reasons, which brings us to 1992, longest break of any release. Or I guess it equals 73 to 80 was 7 years, because 74 wasn't released. And then 85 to 92 is 7 years. Ono Box, 6-disc box set of stuff from her all of 68 to 85. If you're someone who likes to dive in when they get started on an artist, this is the place. It's got all flavors of Yoko, experimental, rock, pop, etc. Well over a dozen previously unreleased tracks as well. And those are the only ones I'm going to talk about. The ones that stand out to me are Open Your Soul to Me from the Season of Glass sessions, Forgive Me My Love from the It's All Right I See Rainbow sessions, and honestly, that's better than most of that album, is Forgive Me My Love. Oh is my favorite of the unreleased. Namyoho Renge Kyo is my second fave. It's weirdness that really works, I think, when you're doing experimentation. For its own sake, it's important. For the listener's sake, I don't know how important it is. But what it does for its own sake as an artist is it eventually, if you keep at it, gets you to a place where the experimentation coheres. It works as a singular composition, and I think that's what this song did. And then there was stuff from A Story on here, some of it, which again wouldn't be released fully until 97. But other thing that was released, 92, was not a companion to this, but kind of the juxtaposition. You got a 6-disc. This is 92, Walking on Thin Ice, just the greatest hits. So if you're not somebody who wants to dive into an artist, who wants to just kind of get to know them for starters, and you're like, I've heard a lot about Yoko, a lot of it's negative, but I want to know for myself, go to Walking on Thin Ice, the 1992 album, and that'll give you a great starting point. Enough there that you may like, dislike, whatever, but you get a real sense of what she has done. In 1994, she put on an off-Broadway musical called New York Rock. And this is mostly consists of reworked old stuff, which, by the way, I'm working on a musical. I have no name for it or much of anything, but I have a writing partner now. And Chris Power, I was on his show. He interviewed me, and we're going to be writing together soon. And I will be using a lot of Rex old material. So I get this. This makes sense to me. But there are also 5 new tracks on New York Rock. I'll Always Be With You, which is fine. Light on the Other Side, which I really like. War Zone, which would be reworked later, and I do like this. Where Do We Go From Here would also be reworked. Story of an Oak Tree. Those are all fine. Cool to hear her stuff sung in a musical theater style, too. And it actually works. The show didn't do well, I don't think, but whoever was on the soundtrack who sang it really somehow melded her style with musical theater and made it work. Rising was her first proper solo album in 10 years. After 1985's Star Piece, Rising is 1995, and this to me is her start of Phase 3, that interim period. Whatever reason, taking a break, doing other things, reissues, etc. Phase 3 starts with Rising. First time it features Sean, not as a kid, just sort of contributing little things, but Sean as an actual musician. He had a band called IMA, I-M-A. That band was the backing band for this album. I love the sound update on this album. It's very 90s. It's kind of like where Bowie went after his 80s sound got a little tired and played out. And of course, I like a lot of 90s production anyway. Also, like a few other previous albums, it meshes the experimental with the straightforward really, really well. It does drag here and there. I wouldn't say it's a top fave album for me, but there are a lot of good, strong things. Her title track harkens back to the long forms she and John did together way back, which is something she hadn't done for quite a while. So this is, like a lot of, like an amalgam of things from her career. First track, War Zone, I love. Wouldn't It is funky cool. Ask the Dragon is even funkier and even cooler. So top 1, 2, 3 punch. And then a few other songs. New York Woman, Talking to the Universe, Turn the Corner. I'm Dying is so mid-90s funk rock in such a great way. Go ahead and listen to it. Where Do We Go From Here? Reworked from New York Rock. Karushi, Will I, Rising, Goodbye My Love and Revelations. None of those are my favorite. But Rising, the title track, is over 14 minutes long. Good for her. Now, technically, as I mentioned, in 1997, A Story was officially released. We talked about that in the context of when it was created, which is how it should be. Blueprint for a Sunrise was her next album. So 6 years between solo albums. 2001 was actually only released on streaming last year. So maybe they are going back in her catalog, releasing stuff that was unreleased. It is experimental feminist concept rock. And frankly, more compelling and cohesive than I would say all of her early 70s experimental stuff. There's something about her development as an artist, her maturity, and the topic maybe that and the production that just brings it all together. Again, Sean is on it with the IMA band, but not credited as such because by then he went solo. So I think Ema had broken up, so they don't credit Ema. But Sean's on it and some of the members of the band. Some of my favorites. I love that it starts with I Want You to Remember Me A and I Want You to Remember Me B, because my album, Kite to Camden, Rex album, starts with linear A and linear B. And I didn't know this album existed or started this way, so that's just sheer coincidence. Synergy, synchronicity. I Want You to Remember Me B is my favorite of the two. And then blah, blah, blah. We've got a bunch of things there. We've got Wouldn't It, a swing version, and we've got Rising 2, which is a little shorter than Rising. And then you have number 7, It's Time for Action, ! Very good. The kind of song that would have been super cliche if done in the 1980s, but because of the 2001 production, it really works. A couple other songs. Mulberry, again, is a 834. I think that's... might have been like a reworking of the old Mulberry. Number 10, I Remember Everything. Such a nice sound. I don't love the melody of this, but I like the sound of it. And Are You Looking for Me absolutely kills. It is industrial, other than the half minute of birds at the end. But it's industrial. The final track on the album kills. Then her output really diminished as far as new stuff. It wouldn't be the end, but that was that, beginning the phase 2 or 3. Phase 3, it was only really those two albums from 95 and 2001, I think. So 2007, Yes, I'm a Witch was released. It's a remix album. And she had already been releasing singles and stuff like this and already been hitting the dance charts and, clubs and stuff like that. And so they figured, hey, let's put an album out. You can see why a lot of her shit works even better as remixes at times or dance tracks. It sounds like a lot of Boy George's music after he got into DJing and started to make stuff like that, which I talked about on my Culture Club episode. And it sounds like a lot of electronic stuff from, 2001 in a very good way. First one, Witch Shocktronica intro, remixed by Hank Shockley from the Bomb Squad, is freaking excellent. Peaches does Kiss, 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 which is a really nice update. Really nice update. Oh, Oh from Shiitake Monkey is so, so good. And Every Man, Every Woman, which was first released in 2004 as Every Man, Every Woman Blow Up Radio Edit, because it's done by Blow Up. So the first 4 songs off this album, bam, bam, bam. Love it, love it. And then you've got a couple that are okay. Number 7's Rising, DJ Spooky, yes, please. That's a version of Rising I can get behind. Number 8, Nobody Sees Me Like You Do, the Apples in Stereo. Of course, I'd like this because I love the Apples in Stereo. It's not my favorite on the album, but I do like it. And then you got to go all the way down towards 14, a reworking of Cambridge 1969 called Cambridge 1969/2007 by the Flaming Lips. And it's very cool. And yes, more listenable than the original. and the album closes, and that cough was for free, with Witch Shocktronica outro by Hank Shockley, again, only 30 seconds, very cool, Coda. And then there's a bonus, Shira na Kata, I Didn't Know, was first included on the 2004 Benefits compilation Genocide in Sudan, remixed by Craig Armstrong. All right, so Open Your Box was also released in 2007 as more remixes, but this one isn't on streaming for whatever reason. The first one to me leaned, the first album in 2007, what was it called again? Yes, I'm a Witch. Leaned more towards quirky remix, kind of like the upcoming Eat Salvation remix, which is the featured song, by the way, on this episode. At the end of the episode, you'll hear Leslie Baroness's remix of Eat Salvation, kind of that kind of quirky remix thing. Open Your Box has more straight-ahead dance remixes. Sometimes too straight ahead for me because, as you know, I'm more of a techno fan than house fan. House gets a little tiring, a little repetitive for me. That said, I do like opening track, You're the One, Bimbo Jones main mix. Very straightforward dance. The third track, I believe, Walking on Thin Ice, Felix the House Cats tribute mix is great. Skip again and then go to Give Me Something, Moral Pink Noise vocal mix, Walking on Thin Ice, Pet Shop Boys electro mix. I like both of those. Skipping to Yang Yang, Orange Factory Down and Dirty mix is very good. And those are my favorites from that album. Which brings us to 2009, which is her first proper solo album since 2001. and is her beginning of phase 4 in her career as far as solo albums, called Between My Head and the Sky. There are a lot of through lines in her phases with experimentation and music hall stuff and traditional and rock and blah, blah, and electronic. But each phase has had a distinct flavor to it. And it was released in streaming only in 2014, though it's missing a couple of tracks from the 2009 version. Released under Plastic Ono Band, first release under that name since the early 70s. It was actually the second release under that revived name, including an iTunes exclusive EP, Don't Stop Me, which featured stuff from this album. So whatever, skip it. The new band, Plastic Ono Band, featured Sean, and it featured Yoko Honda from Chibomato, who I've always loved. Great mix, easily more diverse than any previous album. To me, like I've talked about in the last couple seasons, some of my favorite bands have done what I call career summations, where they take pieces of all the different sounds they've done throughout their careers, like Red Hot Chili Peppers did it. Wonderful album, the first of the two they released. This is like that. So to me, I would almost say there are a couple early ones I would go to first. I would go to the Season of Glass, yes. But as far as you want to know what she's done in more of a modern sense, but still that kind of little bit of everything, go to Between My Head and the Sky. It's really great for that. It doesn't ignore any part of her, the experimental, the traditional, the remix. It's all probably top 3 album for me, maybe, but definitely top 5. Waiting for the D Train, post-punk experimental like no age. Freaking great. The Sun Is Down, Cornelius mix, funky electronica, nice left turn from the first song. So it starts out really strong. Then you go down to Calling, cool psychedelic funk. Yes, please. And then you go to the title track. I feel like her 70s stream of consciousness stuff should have been more like this, because the energy of the title track of this album really sustains that kind of singing stuff. Really works. And then Watching the Rain, really nice indie pop. So those are my favorites from that album. Then she released an EP in 2011 called The Road of Hope, which was included in a book of hers. You can look it up. And also that year, they released The Flaming Lips with Yoko Ono, Plastic Ono Band. So it was a collaboration there. The following year, she released another remix album, Ono Mix. I didn't listen to it, but it looks like it's got some interesting tracks on there. Same year, 2012, Yoko I'm Thurston with Kim Gordon and Thurston Moore from Sonic Youth. I confess I have never been a Sonic Youth fan, and I was only passingly interested in Kim Gordon's recent solo album. And this EP reinforces why it to me, and I mean it's in their name, so I shouldn't be surprised, they're too enamored of sonic landscapes at the expense of momentum. And the bands who do that, I love experimenting with sound, but if there's not something in there that is a form that hooks, you lose me. But following year, 2013, her next proper solo album after 2009, Take Me to the Land of Hell. So she sort of became, in many ways, more prolific in the 2010s. Really, this is the last solo album to feature all new material. So a little over 10 years ago, again with the Plastic Ono Band, but also a real who's who of artists, including Sean and Yoko Honda. And is it Yoko Honda? Yeah. Why did I say Yoko Honda? Because I think there was a spell correct. Ad Rock and Mike D from the Beastie Boys. And recall, this is the year after MCA died, but they were on this album. Lenny Kravitz is on this album, and Questlove. I don't think this album holds together as well as the previous album, which is one of my top faves, but it's still really strong and more of a piece sound-wise than Between My Head and the Sky, which was that career summation thing I talked about. And keep in mind, in 2013, she was 80 fucking years old. And then listen to this and tell me what you think. Some of my favorites, track 2, Cheshire Cat Cry, has Lenny Kravitz on drums and keys. Number 4, Bad Dancer, is the one with Ad Rock and Mike D. It's electro, rock, funk, and very cool. Number 6, There's No Goodbye Between Us. It's like a lot of her other maudlin ballads that don't always grip me, but it's better. momentum and better production. Following track, Seventh Floor, very cool art funk, works to me. Then go down number 10, Watching the Dawn, old school, nice haunting piano, really works for me. And then number 12, Shine, Shine, yes, funky dance rock works. So almost half of the songs to me are super strong. 3 years later in 2016, she released Yes, I'm a Witch 2. Another remix album, but also a collabs album. So a mixture of remixes and collaborations and a nice mix of styles. Kind of a mix of Yes, I'm a Witch, and if Yes, I'm a Witch, which was the quirky, and Open Your Box, which was the dancey, were mixed together, you get Yes, I'm a Witch 2. All right. Even songs that don't work for me on this have a really nice, interesting production, and it's probably because I prefer dance music production from the 2010s in some ways more than the early 2000s, but who knows? I like a little bit of each. Danny Tenaglia, Walking on Thin Ice, more interesting than any of the other remixes of this. And it's slow, the strings that are haunting, yes. Death Cab for Cutie does Forgive Me My Love, electro, pop, rock, whatever. It's on my playlists now. Along with a couple of others previous. And then you go down to David Audet, Wouldn't It? It's the first time to me it made this song super interesting, and it's also on my playlist. It's very danceable. Jack Douglas does Move On Fast. Straight up rock. Yes, my favorite version of this song. I wasn't a big fan of the original. And then another one, Blow Up, does Approximately Infinite Universe. Electro rock that kicks. And I think it's a little bit better than the Rocky Horrorist original, although I also liked that one for its own reasons. Chibo Mato, before mentioned, does Yes, I'm Your Angel. Again, I always found that band interesting. This is no exception. So different from Tra-la-la-la-la. So different, but both are great for different reasons. And yet, I mean, 2016, this one kills. It just kills. And then some, names like Tune Yards and blah, blah, blah. Moby does one. I'm not a fan of Moby, and his Hell in Paradise is hell. I just don't find him interesting. I did for a very brief period in the late 90s, although I've known about him since the late 80s. Deacon closes the album with There's No Goodbye Between Us. It's a bonus, actually. It's not on the album. It's a bonus. Nice, moody, like it. 2018 was her last proper solo album, Warzone. But it's reworkings of old stuff. And to me, it's the first time her voice sounds like she's getting old, which, okay, she was 85. Why not? And I guess you'd kind of count this as phase 5, Generally interesting reworkings, moody and not overdone. And I can't say that enough. It strikes me, though, in a funny way, like she's a female Schwarzenegger in that no matter how long she's been an American speaking English, her accent is still the same. And so what? That's cool. But it's funny that that's the case. Lots of this is from Star Piece, as if she realized that stuff deserved better production. And these versions are better than Star Piece. Oi, 85. Some of my favorites, Now or Never, from Approximately Infinite Universe, subtle, nice. Where Do We Go From Here, from Rising, nice version, more interesting to me than the original. Number 6, It's Gonna Rain from Star Piece, better than the original. Children Power from Star Piece, much better than the original. Didn't even like the original. And number 13, The End. How many times Imagine has been redone and how many times it showed up on one of her albums. I don't need to hear most versions of Imagine. Not because I don't like it, because they're usually super sentimental, treacly, nothing interesting about them. It's one of those overplayed songs that you never hate, but you don't need to hear. That said, this version of Imagine is so stripped down that it really, really works. If you want to hear a great version of Imagine, go to this one. And then 2022 released Let's Have a Dream, 1974 One Step Festival is a live album. And then this year she released selected recordings from Grapefruit, which is sounds, field recordings, and orchestral compositions from the 1964 Fluxus Art Exhibition, Grapefruit, famous. Recorded by the Great Learning Orchestra out of Stockholm. It can be heard, as far as I know, only on Bandcamp. Maybe YouTube, I don't know, but I found it on Bandcamp, and it's very interesting and worth listening to. Final note here in the discography is that she's released quite a few non-album singles from 2001 to 2021, mostly dance track. far more singles in the last 25 years than in her previous 30 years. And if you count those and a few of the album singles, she has had 13 tracks hit number one on the dance charts. Who else has? Some people, very few. 18 have hit the top 10 in the dance charts, and 22 have hit the top 20. Any artist would kill for that. She also had 2 top 40 singles in the UK, Walking on Thin Ice in 1981 and 2003. So the same song went top 40. And only one, of course, as I mentioned, Walking on Thin Ice, number 58, hit the mainstream charts. Let's get to conclusions. Yeah, I told you this would be a longer episode. I get that people might not like her experimental stuff or any experimental performance arty stuff. I get that because I'm not a huge fan of it in terms of the listening experience unless I'm in a certain mood. I do like some of it, though. I will say that, especially for shorter forms or ones that have a little bit more, oomph or, momentum to them. But in terms of this stuff existing and why experimental exists in any medium, I'm a diehard fan. It blows up paradigms. It opens up genre restrictions. It's important to explore these things. And it eventually, always, some of it infiltrates and influences more traditional genres. This is all about expression and growth. And great that somebody has the privilege to do this. Much of what she did has made its way into mainstream music. Proto, whatever. Often in more ways than we know. When John commented that Rock Lobster sounded like her stuff, it wasn't an accident. Always, she has pursued her own vision no matter who she's worked with, John included. John didn't run the day there, neither did she. They collaborated, but she always followed her vision. I can 100% relate to that, as I have had the luxury, without a label and without mega career pressure, to go do whatever I want whenever I want, which is not often the case for many artists. I don't pretend to try to massage the charts or go left or right because someone told me to. I do it because I want to, and that's what she did. And she had the pressures, career and the hatred and disdain, but she never wavered. That is strength and vision, focus. As both an experimental and straightforward artist, she deserves respect, but where the musical respect really hits is how diverse and wide-ranging her music is and has always been, and that she continued to add more elements to her sound well into her 80s. She is an accomplished music creator in her own right. She's also always done what she wanted in visual art and social activism, and I'm sure everywhere else, which of course vexes people who don't like that kind of powerful autonomy, and too bad. And again, if you'd like to know more about that, check out the bonus MxTRA video about her films at patreon.com/musicisnotagenre. I had a real fun doing that one. Actually, I had real fun researching it. I will be recording it in a few minutes. There's really no other conclusion that needs to be drawn from reviewing her career, but since people won't be satisfied unless I bring up some of this, here you go. Did she break up the Beatles? No. I would love to just leave it that as the answer, but no. If you love and respect John Lennon and the Beatles, then why would you ever assume that any outside force could make that decision for them? Any slightly deep study of their breakup reveals there were several factors. And I argue that Yoko wasn't one of them. Why? John would have stayed in the band if any of those other factors weren't so compelling. He more or less said this in subsequent interviews. The fact that he had someone to go to, a landing place. Yoko was a place to go, made it easier to leave, but it wasn't the reason for leaving. All right? And 100% doesn't mean that she was angling to break them up. So again, fuck off, y'all. Not personally, but opinion-wise. Fuck off. Was she a manipulator, etc., etc.? That is racist. You know it is. And it's misogynist. You know it is. All right? She's a strong Asian woman. That's why you think that. And she's somewhat shy in the way she speaks, so it makes her seem like she's thinking like this. But, no. You could see the humor in the stuff she's done and the well-roundedness of her as a person. She had her own career, all right? She already had John, who, of his own volition and judgment and heart, fell in love with her. Okay? She had zero reason to manipulate. Did she ruin or control John? Again, I go back to the first point, which is if you respect John as a person, flaws and all, and yes, he had flaws just like everyone, you should give him credit for making his own decisions like a big boy and not being seduced into something he didn't want, which is just bullshit propaganda. Every indication is that A, he was a troubled person whose relationship with everyone was troubled to some degree, though ultimately coming from a loving place, and B, he wanted to be with Yoko. Anyone who can have an 18-month lost weekend and come back to a marriage even stronger clearly wants it, and she did too. I've made it my mission that anytime a person's comment, which might otherwise be perfectly reasonable online, slides in a snide mention of Yoko, I will actively refute it. And this last hour or so I've dedicated to her, not to mention the hours of listening and research, will I hope be my ultimate refutation. All right. But as always, I want to hear from you, whether you agree or not. I want to know. I really want to know how this is hitting you. But that brings me to the featured song. Not an easy pick, because I didn't know her music all that well. I'm sure anything I've done that has weirdness in it has been indirectly influenced by her, but I don't think there's been any direct influence. That said, the featured song ended up dropping in my lap at the perfect time. If you've been listening, you know that it is Rek's latest single. You know that Rek's latest single is Eat Salvation, but that this week on May 9th, 2025, there is a remix of that Eat Salvation LR remix by Leslie Baroness that is dropping. That is the featured song coming up in a minute or so. Why is this the perfect pick? 3 reasons. The original Eat Salvation is somewhat experimental, quirky, weird, raw, confessional, ambient, funky rock, all of which fits in with Yoko's style. Number 2, it is a remix, which she's had tons of experience success with. And number 3, the style of the remix is even quirkier and weirder than the original, similar to her remixes. Stay tuned a few minutes to hear it. Check it out everywhere on May 9th. The link has been provided. Questions: are you a Yoko hater? Hi. Do you begrudgingly respect her even if you don't like her and or her music or artistic output? Or do you feel Yoko is an incredibly accomplished artist in her own right? Basically, my question here is, did I make you angry? Did I make you angry? Do you think I'm ridiculous? Or are you cheering and excited that someone, and an old white dude at that, finally laid it down on her behalf? I want to know the answers to all these questions because, as always, my objectives here are music, conversation, and connection. Thank you for hanging with me for this extra special, extra long episode. Stay tuned for the featured song, and I will talk to you next week. Eat salvation. Life flies at a 2x flow, 2x flow, 2x flow. Eat salvation. Eat salvation, rule the world. Eat like dominoes, how slow. Like been around enough, you know. Like dominoes, one town and another goes. Dominoes, like slow motion dominoes. Eat